Thank you very much, Fran. We are here because of my book, which is over there on the table. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, good. But also, I thought what we would do tonight is conjure up the spirit of Sherlock Holmes, for which I need to wear my glasses. And I thought, what better way to do that than to conjure up the spirit of his creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sir Arthur was a great believer in the spirit world and in fairies and similar things. He was a follower of spiritualism, of table rapping. Oh, look, he's rapping now. He's an impatient spirit, so perhaps we should have a sort of seance, hold hands, focus our energies. I will be the medium and we'll try to conjure up Sir Arthur. Sir Arthur? Will his work? Will we get Sir Arthur in the room?
Oh.
Sir Arthur. Is that you?
Who is that? Where am I?
You're visiting us here in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Vancouver, eh? Interesting. Came here in 1923 to talk about spiritualism. Lovely place. Enthusiastic reception. But I liked all of Canada. Took a fine trip across it in 1914, just before the Great War. Not so great, really. Cost me a brother and a son. But of course, we remained in touch. Who did you say you were again?
Sheldon Goldfarb in Canada.
Yes, Canada. I especially remember the 1914 trip. We started in Montreal, and before you knew it, thanks to the wonderful Grand Trunk Railway, we made our way to the Great Lakes, sailing across them to Winnipeg and the Rockies. I wrote a poem about Canada, you know.
Sir Arthur, I didn't realize you were a poet. I mostly know you because of...
Do not mention that person's name, please. Now listen to my poem. My life is gliding downwards, its speed swifter to the day, when it shoots the last dark canyon to the plains of far away. But while its stream is running through the years that are to be, the mighty voice of Canada will ever call to me.
That's quite different, Sir Arthur.
There is more, you know.
Well, we wouldn't want to detain you too long. What we really wanted to talk to you about was...
Don't speak the man's name.
But Sir Arthur, he made you famous.
I would have been just as famous, more famous, if I could have had more time for my poetry or my historical novels. Have you read them? Micah Clarke, The White Company, Sir Nigel.
Let me ask the others. Has anyone here read these?
No. No.
I don't think so. But we all admire you greatly because of, well, you know.
All right, we might as well get it out then. I'm remembered because of those detective stories and that eagle-eyed investigator I conjured up who knows how. I used to tell people he was based on an old professor of mine, Joe Bell. But who is to say where a character really comes from? People came to visit me and said, "Why, you're not the great detective, you're Watson." I guess I look more like a Watson. That's a good likeness. But, you know, you really can't create a character without having some of him in you. And later, I tried to play detective myself, looking into cases people brought me. Though, of course, really, I was just a doctor and a writer.
Yes, people might know that, first of all, you worked as a doctor.
Yes, in Plymouth, sharing a practice with this wild colleague of mine. He might have been a model for you-know-who too. Then in London, where I tried to become an eye specialist. but I found I attracted no patients. I had a waiting room and a consulting room, but really it was just 2 waiting rooms. And while I waited, I'd write, and I got various stories published. But I knew really the thing was a book. And what would I write a book about? I admired Poe and his detective and thought maybe I could do something in that line. And so I created...
Yes?
Oh, we might as well say his name. I can't conjure him away now. I tried to, you know. Threw him off the falls at Reichenbach. Had him seem to die, symbolically, you know, any number of times. Why, in one story, I created a bust of him, a dummy. That was a nice touch, you know. Turned the brilliant detective into a dummy. Well, oh, and then I created his even smarter brother, Mycroft, to sort of put him down. But I was talking about the bust. I had it blown to smithereens. That will do for you, Mr. Holmes. Oh, I've said the name.
Sir Arthur?
Yes, it's okay. I should be grateful to Holmes, though he distracted me from my more serious work. How many more Micah Clarks might not I have written? I admire that Milne person.
Milne?
A. Milne. Winnie the Pooh. People went mad for that silly bear, but Milne said, I'm not just a creator of silly children's stories, I'm a serious writer, and went on to write plays and novels and all sorts of works for adults.
Did he? I'm afraid he's just known for Pooh and Piglet and Eeyore, and of course Christopher Robin.
Yes, that's the problem. The public try to turn you into a one-hit wonder when you want to do so many things. You know, that Milne character wrote a Sherlock Holmes story, a parody, a spoof. I hear of lots of these things now. People not only wanted me to write about Sherlock Holmes, they decided they could write about him too. I don't know what's worse, making me do it or do it themselves. And then my old friend Gillette portrayed him on stage and invented that silly deerstalker cap. Or no, maybe that was Paget's doing. Paget, you know, the first illustrator. Well, not the first, there were ones before. Even my dear father, who was a bit, well, I think alcoholic is the term you use now. Very sad.
Sir Arthur?
Very sad to lose a parent that way. But he was a good illustrator, you know. Perhaps not as good as his brother, my uncle. I wonder if illustration runs in families. Paget, Sidney Paget, that's who we got to do the illustrations of the stories in the Strand magazine. But it was actually some sort of mistake. We really wanted his brother Walter. Oh well, Sidney did well, and ironically used his brother as his model. And so we have the Paget Holmes. Not really what I had in mind, you know. I wanted someone both uglier and more powerful, sharp-featured. Like this, perhaps. Ah, no. That's Shylock from Shakespeare. I wonder if I had him in mind. Would that make Holmes Jewish? The mind is a strange thing. People say I got the last name from Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was indeed a sort of hero of mine, a doctor philosopher in the United States, author of The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table. But the Sherlock part, people say there was a cricketer, and I was a great cricket fan, even played some myself, and a schoolmate, and an aunt's maiden name, and even a police detective, an Inspector Sherlock, who I might have heard of. Perhaps. But now I'm thinking Shylock. Why not? But there have been so many Holmeses. Gillette, of course, and Basil Rathbone, and Jeremy Brett, and in your time this Downey person. And then the one everyone swoons over with a name that sounds like part of a dinner jacket. You know the one.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
That's the one. Anyway, Holmes rather got away from it. Sometimes an author says a character ends up doing things he didn't intend at all, but they still mean within their own books. Holmes has escaped out of my books and into the world. It reminds me of that Star Trek episode where Moriarty tries to escape the holodeck, which reminds me of yet another Holmes, Data. It is quite incredible, actually. I wrote stories. I confined Holmes to those stories, and here he is just everywhere.
But Sir Arthur, isn't that good? Now you are known as the creator of one of the most famous characters of all time.
Some would deny me even that. Some say Watson wrote the stories. And they won't call them stories. True accounts, they say. Imagining that Holmes and Watson really lived, and that 221 Baker Street was a real place.
Looks real to me. I think they're just playing a game, Sir Arthur.
Yes. And I blame Ronald Knox, who started the whole thing while I was still alive. I got my own back at him, you know, by having Holmes mock Watson one time for saying, maybe everything we heard is made up, as if the aim was to ignore what's been written and come up with the most outlandish explanations. But then I thought, I'll play the game myself, make up that brother for Sherlock. Or was that before? Anyway, others were imagining whole biographies for him. But never mind.
Well, we can ignore all that, Sir Arthur, and just discuss the stories as you originally wrote them.
I'd still rather talk about Micah Clarke.
I'm afraid most of us here are more interested in some details about the Holmes stories. For instance, is there any truth to the rumor that you collaborated with Oscar Wilde on The Sign of the Four? Or perhaps that the two of you wrote that book and Dorian Gray together?
Wrote Dorian Gray together? Wherever did you hear such poppycock?
Well, actually, it's in my own book.
I'm very sorry to hear that. I thought you Canadians were more sensible than that. I met Wilde, of course, at a very interesting dinner party arranged by Joseph Stoddart of Lippincott's magazine. He wanted each of us to write a story or novella for him. And we did. Mine was Sign of the Four, and Wilde's was Dorian Gray. And they appeared the same year in Lippincott's. But we didn't write them together. What a notion.
They do both have interesting doubles in them, though, doppelgangers. Dorian and his picture, the twin brothers Sholto.
Oh, that. Well, we may have discussed, or maybe Stoddart, the editor said, but the whole idea is nonsense.
And which is your favorite Holmes story, Sir Arthur?
I've answered this question before. You know, you could look it up. I think I said the one about the snake. Can't remember its name.
The Speckled Band,
That's the one.
full of phallic imagery.
Phallic what? What poppycock? Is that how you people talk now? Why, it's indecent. All that man Freud's fault. It's just a story about a snake.
And a rope, a snake slithering down the rope and beaten back by a stick and a whip and a leash, all in the name of patriarchal oppression.
Patriarchal oppression?
Yes, yes, very far-seeing of you, Sir Arthur. And many of your stories contain strong women, new women.
Ah, new women. I suppose you'll be talking of the suffragettes next. Insuffragettes, really. Insufferable. Chaining themselves to railings and threatening to blow things up.
But, Sir Arthur, when you wrote about women in your stories, they are often very heroic and resourceful.
Well, yes, in the stories.
Like Violet Hunter, figuring out what was going on in the Copper Beaches. And, of course, Irene Adler.
Ah, yes. Irene Adler. The woman. It's interesting how alive they seem to me still. How your characters live on, even after the books they're in are done. Like Holmes himself, as we've been saying. But look here, what I really should be talking to you about is people living on. After death, I mean. Spiritualism. That was my great calling. Much more important than a foolish detective and his rather stupid friend.
Surely not a foolish detective.
All right, a clever detective, but his friend was rather stupid.
Sir Arthur.
I made him up. I can say what I like of him. And look, see? They both look rather stupid there.
Sir Arthur.
Not fair? Well, never mind. Anyway, I wanted to talk about spiritualism. Talking to the spirits. Why, I'm one myself. It's great proof of what I argued for all along.
It's actually quite interesting that, though, especially at the end, you became a believer in the paranormal, the supernatural. In the Holmes stories, there's not a hint of that.
You forget the hound.
Well, perhaps a hint. But you don't have Sherlock Holmes believe in fairies like one of your other characters, Professor Challenger.
No, well, it wouldn't have been true to the character. But that was just a story. You seem to be forgetting that. In the stories, the great hero, the great detective, is a severe rationalist.
Not always, though.
Yes, you're right. I had him become a bit mystical at times. I had him undergo an out-of-body experience. I even called him a strange Buddha and had him meditate on an Eastern couch, a divan. Why, I see you've used that picture for your book. And he was a great believer in the imagination,
So
the
a sort of
creative spirit.
So a sort of hidden spiritualist.
You may be onto something there. But of course, overtly, I had to keep him scientific and rational. But it was just a story. In the stories, there's nothing overtly supernatural. But of course, in real life, there is. There are no fairies in the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Nor vampires.
Ha ha, good one. Not even in the Sussex vampire story. There's not a real vampire there. Or should I have said that? That's what you people call a spoiler. And Holmes says he and Watson must stay rooted in reality. Which is a good joke, you know, because reality actually includes fairies.
And vampires?
Well, I don't know about that. I think my friend Bram Stoker just made them up. But fairies, yes. We had photographs.
You don't think those were fake, Sir Arthur?
Faked? Nonsense. Spirit photography is an important aspect of the manifestation of the other world in this one. Like ectoplasm. I have lots of ectoplasmic photos I could show you.
Sir Arthur.
Well, never mind that. But you mustn't take the views in my stories as real. They're just fiction.
Some people find them quite real.
Yes, I get letters addressed to Mr. Sherlock Holmes asking him to solve some little mystery of theirs, or to hire them as the new housekeeper.
Why do you think people felt that way?
Why indeed? He became a monstrous growth. I can't explain it.
Someone to worship, perhaps, in a time of waning faith.
You may be onto something there. We're always looking for meaning, and Holmes could provide it. Dispel the fog, shine a light, comfort people in their bafflement.
But not actually save anyone.
What do you mean?
Sherlock Holmes is better at solving than saving. He can explain things afterwards, but not protect anyone from harm.
My dear sir, he saves Helen Stoner.
But not John Openshaw. And in the Greek Interpreter, there is such delay and putting the advertisement in the paper.
Well, that was Mycroft's fault. And I think I was trying to suggest that two detectives is one too many, or two Holmeses. They get in each other's way. It's like having an extra leg. But it was fun to write about Mycroft and put Sherlock in his place. Family dynamics, you know, very interesting. Usually among the clients, though. Have you thought about the Beryl coronet? Those rival children, and who is good and who is not?
A bit like King Lear, actually.
I would never claim to be in the same category, but yes. The good child seems to be bad, and the bad one seems to be good.
And then there are the characters named Arthur.
The character's named Arthur.
There are 8 characters named Arthur in the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Are there really people who go around counting these things up? Who does these things?
Well, me. Others too. I wasn't the first. Anyway, it made me wonder if you named some people Arthur for a special reason. It is your name, after all.
It was simply a common name, my dear boy. I fear you are looking for meaning where there is none.
But
Come, enough of that. They are just names. Arthur, John, Violet.
yes, there are lots of violets too. What do they signify? Holmes once talked about roses. Are violets also important?
Perhaps. I just like the name. It's so long ago now. Do you have any other questions?
What were your views on empire?
The British Empire or the Roman? I wrote about that too. Though perhaps one writes about one just to write about the other.
Either one, Sir Arthur.
Well, of course, the British Empire was a deucedly good thing, bringing civilization. My friend Kipling wrote about it, probably better than I could.
He's not in that much favor anymore, Sir Arthur.
Kipling? But he was a fine writer, and not just an apologist or anything like that. One would have to be a fool not to see both sides of things. Even in my Boer War books. Well, I was quite generous to the Boers.
Some would say you were also quite generous about the Germans. In his last bow, for instance, you seemed quite respectful, even though the war was already underway.
Yes, well, fair play, you know. Do you play cricket? You would understand better then. British fair play and all that.
But you yourself showed the British at perhaps not their best in the Sign of the Four, stealing that treasure. Empire doesn't seem that good there.
Well, of course, there are lots of greedy types who latch on to things. And one problem about empire is that if you go out there, you end up bringing things back. It's like contagion.
We certainly don't talk like that anymore, Sir Arthur, unless we're living in the White House. But your attitude seems rather changeable.
The empire is changeable. The world is changeable. You can't be having the same attitude to it all the time.
So that's why sometimes the mysterious East seems to bring us danger, and sometimes wisdom.
Exactly. It can do both, you know.
And sometimes you seem to be warning against complacency and not doing anything despite real dangers. I think of Colonel Lysander Stark. And sometimes you warn against seeing dangers in the wrong places, like the German teacher who was actually trying to help.
Yes, yes, moderation in all things. There is no one explanation of everything.
And yet, Moriarty.
Yes? What of him? He plays a minor role, you know. How many stories is he in? 2, 3 out of 60?
And yet when he's there, he seems to be the explanation of all crime, which made no sense to me. Was he responsible for stealing the racehorse? Or for stealing the naval treaty? For what happened in A Study in Scarlet?
You do ask a lot of questions.
It's my way.
Well, that's good. I followed the Society of Psychical Research in my younger days, asking questions about spiritualism. But eventually you come to answers.
And Moriarty is the answer?
He's one answer. Emerson has a line somewhere about containing multitudes.
And contradicting himself.
Yes, life is full of contradictions.
I wanted to ask you about A Study in Scarlet and The Sign of the Four.
Yes, the first 2 Holmes books. Not that I ever thought of them that way, or not at the time. I mean, I didn't write Study in Scarlet thinking this will be a series. I mean, nowadays I understand series are everywhere. It wasn't like that in my day. In fact, you could say I invented the idea. I thought I could take my detective, Sherlock Holmes, and write a series of stories about him. Not a serial, you understand. Those had been around forever. Dickens, Thackeray. But with a serial, if you miss an installment, you're lost. No, I got in touch with the Strand magazine and pitched them the idea of a series of self-contained stories, each one with Sherlock Holmes in it, but each one standing alone. So if you missed one, it didn't matter.
But what I wanted to suggest was that the focus wasn't even on Sherlock Holmes in the first story in Study in Scarlet.
How do you mean?
Well, I'd like you to cast yourself back to that time in 1886 when you were inventing John Watson.
Holmes' stupid friend.
Was he so stupid? He's just like us, isn't he?
Well, you say it, not I.
Isn't Holmes rather the odd man out? The thinking machine taking cocaine? Divorced from all normal relationships, all romance?
If you say so.
I'm just drawing on your own story, Sir Arthur.
I feel like I'm being cross-examined.
Sorry, but I wanted to focus on Watson.
He wasn't going to be called that, you know. He was going to be Ormond Sacker.
So I've heard.
But that was much too exotic. I wanted something down to earth for my sidekick.
But was he even going to be just the sidekick? I think I read somewhere that you wanted the doctor to be the hero. He'd be a doctor detective, like your old medical professor Joe Bell, just solving criminal mysteries instead of medical ones.
It's hard to remember now. It's so long ago. In any case, it pretty quickly became Holmes and Watson.
But it's a detective's... Oh, but I'm thinking that in the first novel, and the second one too, the focus is really on Watson.
But it's just a detective story, at least the first part. Then I got transported to Utah and talked about Jefferson Hope and the Mormons,